In the summer of 1944, the world's greatest ocean became the stage for one of the most decisive and brutal confrontations of the Second World War. Across the turquoise waters of the Pacific, American warships closed in on a small volcanic island, fringed with coral reefs and tropical foliage. Its name was Saipan. Just 72 square miles in size, this speck of land would determine the fate of empires. For the United States, victory meant a direct path to Japan's home islands, the ability to unleash long-range bombers that could set Tokyo ablaze. For Japan, Saipan was the last shield of defense, the gateway to their very heartland. And so, on these shores, the Pacific War became a war to the death. Saipan was part of the Mariana Islands, long under Spanish, then German, and eventually Japanese control. By the 1940s, it was fortified as a stronghold, home to 30,000 Japanese soldiers and thousands of civilians. It was more than just a military base, it was a colony, a projection of Japanese power deep into the Pacific. Here, Japan built airfields, dug caves, and prepared for a clash they believed would never come. But after the fall of the Marshall Islands earlier that year, the Americans set their sights westward. Their target was clear. Admiral Chester Nimitz declared, "The Marianas are the key to Japan's inner defenses." Capturing Saipan meant striking a mortal blow in early June 1944. The might of the U.S. Pacific Fleet surged across the sea. More than 500 ships carried 127,000 men toward Saipan. The largest armada yet assembled in the Pacific bore down on its prey. The Japanese defenders, under Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, vowed resistance to the last breath. "It is better to live as ghosts of the empire than surrender," he told his men. On June 15th, as dawn broke, the horizon roared with naval guns. Battleships and cruisers unleashed an inferno that shattered the beaches, black smoke curling into the sky. At 8:44 a.m., the first waves of US Marines stormed ashore. The landing was hell. Japanese machine guns, concealed in bunkers, raked the surf with fire. Mortar shells plunged into the churning sea. Marines were cut down as they waded forward, packs dragging them into crimson water. One recalled, "We were walking into the mouth of death." Yet wave after wave pressed on, clawing their way onto the sand. By nightfall, 8,000 Americans were ashore. But the cost was staggering: 2,000 men dead or wounded in a single day. As the Americans advanced inland, the battle transformed into a nightmare of terrain and resistance. Saipan's jungles, ravines, and volcanic ridges became killing fields. Japanese troops fought from caves, trenches, and hidden tunnels, ambushing with bayonets and grenades. The Americans replied with flamethrowers, demolition charges, and tanks. The island shook with violence, its green canopy shredded into dust. In the skies above, dogfights raged as US Hellcats tore through Japanese Zeros, stripping away the last vestiges of air cover. Offshore, the clash escalated into one of the greatest naval battles of the war, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, remembered as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, where American pilots annihilated Japanese carrier planes, dooming Japan's naval aviation forever. Yet on Saipan, the struggle only grew more savage. General Saito's defenders, though cut off and outgunned, clung to every ridge and cave. The Americans dubbed one battlefield Death Valley, where artillery fire never ceased. Civilians, too, were caught in the inferno. Thousands of Japanese settlers, fearing capture, fled into the hills. Many were urged to take their own lives rather than fall into enemy hands. At Marpy Point, cliffs overlooking the ocean became scenes of unspeakable tragedy, as families leaped into the sea in what became known as the Banzai Cliff. Survivors later remembered the cries of children carried away by the waves. The climax came on July 7th, 1944. With his forces broken, General Saito ordered one final, desperate assault. "We will advance to attack the enemy, leaving only our bones to guard the island," he declared. At dawn, more than 3,000 Japanese soldiers, joined by armed laborers and wounded men, charged in a furious Banzai attack, the largest of the war. They hurled themselves against American lines, screaming in defiance, wielding rifles, bayonets, even makeshift weapons. The shock was immense. U.S. soldiers of the 105th Infantry were overrun, entire companies cut down in hand-to-hand combat. But with artillery and machine guns blazing, the Americans held firm. By midday, the Banzai charge was annihilated. Thousands of Japanese lay dead upon the fields of Saipan. General Saito himself committed ritual suicide rather than surrender. When the guns finally fell silent, Saipan was in American hands. But victory bore a terrible price. More than 3,000 Americans had been killed, 13,000 wounded. The Japanese suffered almost total destruction, 29,000 soldiers dead, and thousands of civilians lost to suicide or crossfire. The island was a wasteland of shattered palm trees, smoldering villages, and silent cliffs stained with blood. For the survivors, the war would never be forgotten, yet the consequences reached far beyond Saipan. From newly built airfields, American B-29 superfortresses now had the range to strike the Japanese homeland. Within months, bombs would rain upon Tokyo, and firestorms would consume entire cities. The Japanese people, once distant from the front lines, now lived in the shadow of war. Emperor Hirohito, for the first time, faced the prospect of defeat. In Washington, President Franklin Roosevelt declared Saipan's capture the most important victory yet in the Pacific. For Japan, it was the beginning of the end. The legacy of Saipan is one of both triumph and tragedy. Strategically, it shattered Japan's outer defenses and opened the road to Okinawa and ultimately to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Culturally, it left scars of grief, the memory of civilian suicides, the haunting cliffs, and the silence of a people led to ruin by a code of no surrender. For the Americans who fought there, Saipan became a symbol of the Pacific War's ferocity, a reminder that victory would demand nothing less than total sacrifice. Today, the island stands quiet. Its beaches, once churned with gunfire, are washed by gentle waves. Memorials rise on the cliffs where so many perished. Tourists walk where armies clashed, unaware of the ghosts that linger. Saipan endures as a chapter of history written in fire, blood, and unyielding will. It tells us why the Pacific War was fought not just for islands, but for the survival of nations, for the future of entire peoples. And so, the story of Saipan reminds us that history is never distant. It lives in the landscapes, in the voices of survivors, in the lessons carried forward. To understand Saipan is to understand the Pacific War itself, war fought to the death, until nothing remained but victory or annihilation. This episode was created with immense effort, drawing from records, accounts, and the memory of those who lived through it. If you value high-quality historical storytelling, support this work so that we may continue to bring the past alive and ensure that the echoes of history are never silenced.